Hey guys, this is Dr. Buck, Reverend Dr. J. Henry Buck Jr. from Making the Case. We're going live this morning. Of course, this is January the 6th, 2025. Hopefully, you've had a wonderful New Year's Day, a wonderful holiday celebration. Here on this particular podcast called Making the Case, we address social, political, religious, and business debates and decisions. And in this, we seek to promote promise and persuasive progressive analytics for a hungry society that is seeking balance and justice. I wanted to come on today, of course, and we will be launching for sure in the next couple of weeks where we will have some guests. But today is January the 6th. January the 6th. And for those, excuse me, who may be watching what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, they have just solidified and called the election for this coming year. Congress just solidified the election, but something else took place just a little bit over 4 years ago, January 6, 2021. We know it as the Capitol riot, and it is very significant in U.S. history because it involved what was considered to be a violent breach of the Capitol building. Supporters of the then president, who's also the incoming president, President Donald J. Trump. The event, of course, raised crucial questions about the health of our United States democracy, of course, about democracy here. It also raised questions about political polarization, partisanship, ideas, roles, and misinformation that can actually be sent out amongst um, the nation, the listeners, and can create this deep divide within society. And it challenges us to look at how we can achieve peace. And so I just want to talk about just a few things before we move beyond today because I think it's very significant. Also, before we do that, want to give a shout out to those fellas of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. On yesterday, we celebrated um, our Founders Day, and so to all of the brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, especially those that are here in the city of Philadelphia. Listen, let's talk a little bit of the background of the summer events that took place on January 6, 2021. We all remember it to a certain degree very well. This was what some consider to be an overtaking. There was a riot, some would call it. It occurred back in Washington, D.C. on this particular day back in 2021. It was during the time that the incoming president, President Donald J. Trump, who's just got reelected, gave us specifically what some consider to be a false speech, claiming that the 2020 presidential election had been stolen. Now, all of this is based on um, their concept, their ideology, those things that they were looking at, and so it is concluded. Some have concluded history, and those who have recorded this. It is concluded that then President Trump urged his supporters to peacefully, and I think we need to make that clear, peacefully and patriotically march down to the Capitol as Congress was in process of the certifying of the Electoral College results, which confirmed Joe Biden's victory. Now, this time about 4 years ago, what was going on is as the process of the certification of the voting was taking place during the time that um, President Trump at that time was serving the notice, the ideology of that particular um, administration. It was considered that the election was stolen. And so there you have, in just that nutshell alone, the upset, the anger, the frustration, um, even in some cases, the racial undertones that were taking place during that time. And yet, it was also during the time of the certification through the Electoral College. But thousands of supporters at that time for Donald E. Trump, or President Donald E. Trump at that time, thousands of supporters, they descended down on the Capitol in Washington, D.C. People traveled from far, people traveled from near, excuse me. And so as they was traveling, they were arriving in Washington, D.C., there are reports that even some of the people, as they were coming in, they had all kinds of paraphernalia that they were wearing, and some of the paraphernalia, some considered to be very outrageous, to be very disrespectful, to be equally very racial. We know about that, even as it relates to them traveling and coming there. And so people were coming from everywhere. You seen Ford F-150s traveling down I-95, even out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was where we're located here as we do making the case. But anyway, people were traveling to Washington, D.C. They were descending down on the Capitol in Washington, D.C. around this time 4 years ago in protest of what was considered to be a stolen election. And so there was this breaching of security, the barriers that were set up. There were those who broke through the barriers. It came on as special report, a special bulletin, and the people had axes, they had sticks, they had stones they were throwing, everything. And you see the policemen, the Capitol Police, was trying their best to defend and hold off these particular people who had become so overbearing. And so the building itself, they overtook the building, they broke into the building. Now, I don't know about you, but that was a day that I would consider that was very dangerous. Now, let me talk a little bit about that because there have been many who have looked at that and said, just with some sense of, I call social interrogation, political interrogation as well, cultural interrogation. Of course, majority of those people were people, and you did have people of color there, but most of those people were of Caucasian. Some were, they were considered to be the very conservative ones. But there have been those who have come out and said, what if those persons had have been 75, 80, 90% people of color, black, that it would have been a bloodbath. And thank God that that was not the case. But you had rioters who vandalized the offices, and you saw it. You had looters who were spray painting the property. They disrupted the certification process, forcing lawmakers and forcing staffers, and even at that time, the vice president to evacuate the building. And so it was a very tumultuous and vulnerable time for our democracy, even as we had to view and witness this, not only from afar, but even those who were local at the time. And I don't know about you, but when you go back, and they're playing a lot of this on TV today, there are a lot of reports. CNN is doing some reflecting on it, MSNBC, and they're just going back to show some things that went on. And I'm sure as the future comes, there are going to be some other documented things that went on that we may not even know about now. But you do know that even out of that whole process, I think they said about 5 people died, and numerous people were injured. And so the background to this was there was this feel that the election had been stolen, and then you had the riot where there were supporters of Donald James Trump at that time. I'm sorry, President Donald James Trump at that time, those who descended down on the Capitol. And then the response, and I think that there is a lot to be talked about as it relates to the response. The National Guard and other law enforcement agencies that were deployed to regain control of the situation, regain control of the Capitol. And the Capitol, even at that time of this tumultuous, this overtaking, this rioting, this looks like a form of political evil, right? Persons who are descending down. It only took them a couple of hours to clear the Capitol, but the certification of the election was delayed and reconvened later that evening because of so much that was going on. Now, I mind you that once again, that's the same thing that's going on at the Capitol right now. They just certified the election. They just certified the election. And 4 years ago, during the particular certification, this is what we were dealing with at that time. So, what are some of the key points of interest that we can look at, learn from? And let me say that I believe, even as we're preparing for the inauguration of the 47th president, once again, in his reelection, President Donald James Trump, I know there's a lot of um, what would I say? I know a lot of people may be upset. I know a lot of people may be angry, but I think this is the time that our democracy must stand firm in spite of who's been sent to the office, in spite of what political party has control or take over. And there's a process that we have within our system of politics, within our system of governance, even within our Constitution. And I want to encourage us. I don't care what side you're on, I don't care what partisan group that you're with. It's time for us to stop downing, degrading, and talking about one another so much to the point where we have created these divides where not neither side has sense enough to even talk about their differences anymore. I would also suggest and infer, even at this moment, as we're looking at some of these things, some of the political crimes that are coming out in our society right now. Look at the things that are happening is because of these extreme ideological partisanship agendas and these manifestos that both sides actually have. I hope and I pray that even we have to learn or relearn how to disagree with those that we disagree with without being violent. So there was a whole lot of misinformation and disinformation that was put forth. Let's look at some of these points, and I'm going to read and talk about a few of them. And I want you to share. You can hit the subscribe button for Making the Case. Here, where once again we try to address societal, political, religious, and business debates and decisions. And of course, we try to bring cases with promising and persuasive, progressive analytics where we seek to bring about justice and balance. That's what we are about here. So, once again, today we're talking about or just having this discussion about the January 6th, 2021 incident that happened on Capitol Hill during the time that, at that time, President Donald J. Trump was the president. And so now he's coming in once again. He's been reelected after President Joe Biden decided not to run, or as some would say, was pressured Nancy Pelosi and her group not to run. And you know that it was Kamala Harris and Senator Waltz who was actually put up to run. And so they were unsuccessful. We'll get to talking about that in another conversation. But listen at these points of discussion when we're talking about misinformation and disinformation. The riot was fueled, listen, by a great deal of misinformation around the 2020 election that some considered was rigged. There were false narratives, and I think we need to address that. We did have false narratives, and you had propaganda and social media. We need to talk about that as well because there were all kinds of tracks, all kind of information put out by social media, even some of the mainstream news media outlets who were pumping, pushing this kind of propaganda. You had all of that. And then you had political figures who were creating an environment where there were those who believed violent action was justified to restore the election results. We actually had people who thought that it was best just to take up arms. Yeah, yep, misinformation about the Second Amendment, yes, but thinking that it was best to take up arms based on disinformation, based on misinformation. And let me say this, I think it was both sides. You may disagree with it, and I understand that. But I think to both sides, there was this kind of misinformation, disinformation, and let's state it clearly. Let's make the point that at that time, President Joe Biden, who was being elected at that time, yes, he did win the election. Yes, he did win. After the counts, after all of the voting came in, yes, he did win the election. Let me make that clear again. Yes, he did win the election. But we had these kind of backdoor conversations, these dark moments where there were the pundits and those who were very upset, and that's really what it was. They was very upset, and they sought to take out their anger, their frustration, taking up arms, and that's all a part of those who came to Washington D.C. at that time to restore justice, to restore uh, the dignity of America, as if America has been great all of its life. Now, I personally uh, do not take any kind of disrespect. I don't think that for me, when I hear the statement "Make America Great," uh, the undertones of that, I know a lot of people get upset about the statement, but I have to be honest with you, totally honest. Yes, I'm a black pastor. I'm from the state of Mississippi, but for me, when I hear the statement "Make America Great," I'm thinking in terms of what can we collectively do as a culture of people, as a culture of humanity, to uplift African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, Caucasians. What collectively can we do to bring about an idea of unity across the lines, across the borders? Watch this. Even as we address differences, I think we should all be striving to make America great. I don't hear it, I don't see it as a statement where it's political. The politicalization of the statement does not paralyze me by the ideology that others seek to bring forth or the platform by which they use it on. I hear it in the sense of I hope that all of us are thinking, looking, and trying to find a way. Inclusivity. We have to learn how to converse with one another, even when we disagree. We have to learn how to not be so quick to tear one another down. Even if we disagree on some things, I would guarantee you that there are a lot of things that we agree on, regardless of what aisle of the partisanship that we are on. If we focus on those things that we agree on, rather than those things that we disagree on. Listen, a couple of years ago, I was invited to the Capitol to give the 118th prayer for the 118th Congress as they reconvene in Washington, D.C. It was one of the best times, one of the best fulfillments, one of the greatest opportunities that I had to be able to go and pray right in the place, yes, where George Bush Sr. stood, yes, in the place where George Bush Jr. stood, yes, in the place where President Barack Obama stood, yes, in the place where Joe Biden is standing, yes, in the place where President Donald J. Trump stood, yes, in the place where many of our presidents address Congress even as they give the State of the Union. I had the privilege to stand right there in that space and in that place to give the prayer for the 118th Congress. And it was a powerful experience for me because after it was over with, got a chance to meet Kevin McCarthy at that time, who was the speaker, got a chance to meet many other of our representatives from the House and the Senate, and being able to shake their hand, but being able to pray a prayer of unity for our nation. That's what we need, unity in our nation, not led by misinformation and disinformation, giving points as it relates to our own partisan ideology. Because I have to say this, one of the dangerous things, Martin Luther King talks about this. One of the most dangerous things that we can do in our society today is think that we have all the right answers on our side. I personally would like to see a unified ticket come in the future, whether it's a Republican and a Democrat run together, not running on our differences, but running on what we think will help bring the constituency of our society together. And so that's a little bit of the narrative I think that we need to begin to have. And if you look at some of the things that are going on now, you see that our social media, our mainstream media, the news outlets, a lot of them have come under fire because now you found out that it was a pay for play. And let me say this, some of that has just been unfolded. All of it has not been revealed. Anyway, so the points of discussion, even as we reflect on January 6, 2021, yes, there was misinformation and disinformation, but the peace perspective, there was the seeking, they were trying to combat misinformation through education, transparency, and responsible media consumption, which I think is very essential in preventing future violence and ensuring the democratic process is respected. That's one that kind of hit our nerves. It's the the democratic process does not only belong to the Democrats, it does not only belongs to the Republicans, it does not only belong to the Green Party, it does not only belong to the independents, it belongs to the entirety of our civilization of persons who participate in this constitutional right to have our voices heard through the ballot box. Let me say that again. I may not be able to state it as eloquent as that, but everybody has a right for their voices to be heard through the voting process, through the process, um, as we choose whom we seek to have leading our nation. I know, I know, I know that there are a great deal of differences as it relates to ideologies, as it relates to thinking, as it relates to the information that's put forth. A lot of the information coming from both sides can be misleading. A lot of it that's coming from both sides could be very misleading. It can be so misleading that it causes us to put forth the wrong idea. Yep, you can cheer it up. It causes us to put forth the wrong ideas. And then we go out and we begin to talk from points and places where we're not equally informed about all of the information that we need to make the best decision. Yep, thank you. Yes. Cheer it up. We have to do that because it's very important. We are leading, we are guiding everything that we do, even in our local spaces and places. Listen, politics are not only national, they are local. And everything that we do at the local level can affect what happens at the national level, even at the state level. And so I think we need to have this sense of understanding that what we say and do at the lowest level affects what happened at the highest level. And if we could ever get in our minds this idea, if we really want to be consumers of peace, consumers of peace. Watch this. Let me go to a preaching moment. Turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor that I am a consumer of peace. If we can consume peace, it's not about um, these dialogues that I think are very false in the very nature that they are presented. But if we are certainly pursuing peace, if we're pursuing this consumption of peace, then there are things that we can talk about that, even if they are very touchy, even if they are very discomforting, I would say that we can find a way for dialogue, even through the political process. But then, yes, we take into account the political polarization, the attack that reflected. Listen to this: the attack reflected, even now. The attack reflected a deep divide between political groups across the US. People's identity are increasingly shaped by their partisan beliefs. Let me say that again. It created a deepening divide between political groups across the United States. And what we found out the hard way, I say the hard way because people even died through that experience. People were beaten. People that was. I to be a U.S. Capitol policeman at that time or policewoman at that time was very dangerous. Just those few hours alone was very dangerous. But anyway, what we have seen, and it is playing out in other measures. Many of you have seen it. We know about it. We know about the young fella that shot and killed the healthcare CEO. We've seen the two terrorist attacks with bombs in Las Vegas. Was it Las Vegas? Yes, Las Vegas at the Trump Hotel. But even what took place down in New Orleans. So here's what we have the extremities, extreme violence that is actually being played out. Look, we cannot point a finger at one another. Watch this. One chicken has two wings, a left and a right one. If my grandmother was here, that's what she would say. But we see these identities that are being increased by the partisanship and the belief and the ideas that are being propagandized by those people who are speaking. For some, the riot was the manifestation of growing frustration with a political system. We cannot ignore that. We cannot ignore that. And for some others, as I stated, it was violent extremism. Now, let's talk about these two for a minute and then we'll move on because I don't want to bore you. When we look at the manifestation of growing frustration in our political system, there are people who still feel that their voices cannot be heard or their voices are not being heard. Uh, yes, there are some who feel that yelling is necessary. There are some, yeah, yes, there are those. What? There are those who feel that yelling is necessary because they are not getting the sound, they are not getting the attention, and their voices are not being heard. Listen, there are people who are dealing with some extreme circumstances right now, and I think that even as we're looking at this current environment that we're in, let's talk about it. Inflation. Uh, we're living in a time now where even a carton of eggs are almost out of reach. The cost for a carton of eggs are almost out of reach. The cost, I'm sorry, for a carton of milk, the cost of food, the cost of clothing, the cost of rent, everything, a lot of things, let me be fair, a lot of things are, are almost at the point where they are out of reach in the cost valuation of that. And there is extreme frustration that is coming behind it. And what there are those who are not getting raises on their job. So when inflation, as inflation increases, home prices rise. People are having to pull out equity in their home to try and pay this out and pay this out, pay this off and pay that off. And then when they're going back to try and recoup the value of that, they're finding now that the houses that they're living in, when their value decrease, then the home equity line of credit that they have taken out, now they're upside down in that. And now you got frustration because wages are not even rising. I know that people are saying, well, wages are going up for who? Who's basically feeling the impact of that? Who's feeling the 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 bottom line of that? Because I think if you look across the vast majority of Americans today, particularly African Americans, people of color, Hispanics, all of that, uh, you're not seeing an increase that's able to keep up with inflation. And so, of course, people are going to be upset. Of course, you're going to have this discourse where persons are not wanting to listen, and then it creates a kind of distrust, not only from the leaders, but even from those who are going into office. It causes a distrust. Let me say this because I'm a pastor. It equally causes a distrust even within the religious community because there are those who will closely associate, I had to get my thought together, will closely associate religious leaders, preachers, and pastors along with political leaders who are only filling their own pockets. I hear it all the time. I get it. We get the finger pointing. All of us are not like that. Let me make that clear. All of us are not like that. No, we're not. All of us, you can cheer on that. All of us are not like that. We are about promoting peace. And so the peace perspective is to bring civil discourse back. The critical steps of healing our nation is not through division, but it's about being able to discuss those ideas, bringing back the idea of being able to have a discourse where we can find common ground, where we can find common ground for steps to move forward. And then that means that we even have to look at the role of our political leaders as it relates to the peace perspective. We even have to look at what is it, right, that a lot of these guys, men and women, are trying to put forth. Are we inundated with a lot of the inflammatory rhetoric that incites violence, which we have become so intoxicated with? We have on both sides, and I am trying to keep this as in the middle of the road. I can point to some things that have happened on the Democratic side. I can equally point to some things that have happened on the Republican side, where there has been a lot of unchecked political speech and inflammatory rhetoric that has incited violence. So neither one of the sides can point to one another and call the kettle black. But we do have some things that we need to talk about. And so the peace perspective is that we choose choose our words carefully. They may call us, they may call them, they may call this, or they may call that. But even as political leaders, even as leaders, bottom line, we have to learn how to choose our words carefully and prioritize a language that is well-being and respective of others, even if we have differences in our political or partisan ideologies. We have to gain the respect. We have to create a level of respect. That's what the democratic institution is all about. That we have the integrity not only to know how to disagree, but how to be respectful in our most disagreeing moments. One area that we need to talk about is law enforcement and security. Now you do remember that when this thing took place, that when this incident happened on January 6, 2021, the initial inadequate response from law enforcement, it raised concerns about the Capitol Police readiness to handle such a crisis. Yes, it really came about. There were also questions about the level of coordination in between local, state, and federal agencies. Now, for some who do not know, Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, so you have Washington, D.C., which there have been many fights to try and create statehood. And then you have, of course, the District of Columbia. You have the federal government there, is what I'm trying to get to. That's sitting there. And there have been many bills, many attempts, um, many movements to create this idea of statehood in Washington, D.C. And you see it on the tags that's on the vehicles. If you buy a tag in Washington, D.C., you will see that the idea is trying to create statehood there. But anyway, so you have the federal government, you have the state government, you have the local governments, and also you have the surrounding states or suburban areas that are there. So there's a great deal of law enforcement there. But then you equally have um, the National Guard, in which they called on at the same time. So you have all of these different law enforcement agencies that are conversing with one another. One does not want to overstep their boundaries, and then you have to look at who's in leadership there, giving others their orders whether to participate or not. So here's a peace perspective for that. Here's a peace perspective for that. Strengthening security preparedness. Yes, strengthening security preparedness, then creating a better coordination across agencies. Here is one of, I think, one of the things that gets a lot of our people in trouble. We will hold more of an allegiance to the person rather than we do to the purpose. There's more allegiance held to the person than for the purpose of us being there. Some people are more concerned about their paycheck. Yes. Some are more concerned about their paycheck. Yes, they are. Yes. They're more concerned about their paycheck rather than the purpose of bringing this degree of security. So there needs to be this cross coordination. I like that because there is the cross, but that's a whole different story. Ensuring that law enforcement, watch this, reflects the diverse and inclusive values of our society. And then we can maintain peace and order without resorting to excessive force. That would be my suggestion on what I would consider to be or call a peace perspective. Let's keep moving on. So then you have accountability and justice. Accountability and justice. We're talking about what took place on January 6, 2021, and how do we work through that? How do we move beyond that? How do we restore the democratic process? Watch this, even if there are people who have been elected to office that we have extreme disagreement and partisan values with, but we still have to have this idea of respect, accountability, and justice. And so you remember, once again, following the attack, that there were a number of rioters who were arrested and they faced charges for their involvement. And at that time, President Trump, who was impeached for the incitement of the insurrection, though he was acquitted in the Senate. Now, you have heard that incoming President 47 President of these United States, President Donald James Trump, with much respect to him, will be looking to pardon some of those people. And so let's just get it straight. Let's just put it right in the center. Presidents have always used their power for political reasons. They have always used their power for political reasons, political posture. Can we just be honest? Um, do you really think that President Joe Biden was going to leave office without making sure he covered his son? You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can, drag my name through the mud. You can say what you want to say. You can be Democrat, you can be Republican about it. You can say, well, he shouldn't have did this. You can say, well, if I would have been, you can say whatever you want to. But do you honestly believe that he was going to leave his son in the crosshairs? Do you believe that he was going to leave his son to be caught up in a political witch hunt when he has the opportunity and has justice on his side for right now? Do you think he was going to leave his son in that condition? Do you think, even with with the language of the administration that's coming in now, do you absolutely believe that Joe Biden was going to leave his son there unpardoned? Um, we can talk about the speech he made. No, I am not, quote, these are his words, quote, I will not pardon my son, end quote. Uh, please, really? You think that was going to happen? Do you honestly think that Joe Biden was going to not pardon? Do you think that he was going to leave his son there? I when he was making the speech, with much respect to um, President Biden, he'll forever be one, I think, that will go in history, who has done whatever he could. And I think all of these guys, but these are the persons that we have selected to go and serve and represent. Um, but come on, let's. Do you think that he was going to leave his son? That's that man's flesh and blood. He was not going to leave his. Would you leave your child there if you have the opportunity um, to free your child? And this is all up under the context of justice. Um, would you have left your child there? I think we all know what would have happened if Joe Biden, if President Biden, excuse me, would have left his son, Mr. Hunter Biden, there. We know what would have happened. And so let me say this: get off of that. Get off of that. Get off of that. Get off of that. President Biden was not going to leave his son out in the cold like that. So we had that. We had the issues with accountability, the issues with justice, and so holding our individuals accountable for their actions is going to be very vital going forth for justice. And also, I think that this would be equally powerful in how we deter violence in the future. It goes to the old cliche. Now we got to begin to practice what we preach. If we're going to talk about, if our leaders are going to talk about those things that are happening upon Capitol Hill, then they have to equally demonstrate those things in those families. And let me raise this issue as we're talking about accountability and justice. Um, one of the representatives here from the state of Pennsylvania. Um, he is getting a lot of backlash. He's getting a lot of flogging. He is, I would equally say, in the crosshairs of judgment. He's a Democrat. But I think, and this is me, this is me speaking. I think that he is trying to strike a tone of listening, even if we disagree. I think he's trying to strike a tone instead of getting upset and emotionally roused in our frustration and anger. Let's try and find a way where we can look at what we agree on rather than losing our minds when the incoming president says something or does something that we don't like. And that's really for a lot. A lot. The fella can't do right. And I'm not saying that he's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm looking at, excuse me, I'm looking at our actions. And so I think the road that this representative is taking, I think we can pay attention to it. Pay attention to it. Watch him. Pay attention to him. Listen to what he is saying. Look at what he's doing, because I think he's trying to bring about uh, a certification of peace. I don't think he's trying to hoodwink or do any of those things to mean that there are some things that he just believed that we should throw everything away and just side with him. No, I think he's really honestly trying to find the best way to proceed going forward, and so I applaud him on that. So listen, um, where can there be peaceful resolution in moving forward? Because we have to govern not in the past. We have to govern for the present and govern for the future. So the first thing I think we need to do, and if there's anybody that's listening from the Trump campaign, I would offer this: reconciliation and healing. Reconciliation and healing. We're still dealing with a deep, fractured state in our American society. And so to heal, there needs to be a focus on reconciliation, which involves not only legal consequences, but also a broader social effort to rebuild trust and understanding. Let us not become so offended that if we are on some aisle or on one side of the aisle, we cannot work with the ones who are on the other side. That needs to be reconciliation and healing. Then there needs to be electoral reform. This is Reverend Dr. James H. Buck talking. I'm not an elected official. I'm just a little old pastor here in the city of Philadelphia, pastor at Grace Baptist Church of Germantown, 25 West Johnson Street, Philadelphia, PA. I'm saying that we need to look at electoral reform. Many of the rioters felt that the political system was rigged. And if you listen to both sides, you do know that Nancy Pelosi used the same language many years ago. She said that the system was rigged. Nancy Pelosi thought that the election was rigged. She did. Go back and look at history. Go back and look at history. And so the electoral reforms that promote transparency, that's what I'm talking about. The electoral reforms that promotes fairness, trust in the democratic process. These things could help us address the grievances, and it could also prevent future unrest. If we would just listen a little more. Here's something that man, listen, this thing got so it got so deep. It got so deep. It got so deep. It got so deep. Um, when one political campaign, I'll just leave it at that, they went out to speak to the Amish people. Yes. One group forgot the Amish people were important. Another group said, I don't care who it is, we're going into areas where we are highly disliked. And we're going to sit, we're going to listen. You may not agree with us, but you'll know where we're coming from. But that one particular group went into those communities, and that's why that community got behind them. The other side excluded them, thinking that they had a free way into the White House, and you got to be very careful. And so, once again, I think that you have to listen to the grievance and not shut people down or shut people out because you don't like what they're saying. You don't like what they're saying. And I got to say this to my Democratic friends. And later on, I'm going to share an experience with you because we own a business. Many of you know here in the city of Philadelphia, we own a business called Southern Flames Barbecue. Southern Flames Barbecue exists to employ returning citizens, disabled vets, and troubled teenagers, offering the opportunity of the taste of a second chance. And the taste of a second chance is our nonprofit. We'll talk about that later in another set or in another conversation. But we can comment on some things because we've seen them behind, and I don't even want to say behind closed doors. We seen some things that were going on. We were equally affected, and I will say troubled by some of the things that we were told, and yet when the reports, I would just say that because we're going to talk about it later. When the reports came forth, the things that they were asking a lot of businesses, small Black businesses, to do, you found out that the resources were going in other places. I'll just leave it there. We'll talk about that later. But electoral reform where we can address the grievances and rebuild trust to prevent further unrest. I think that's reforming the electoral process, and then promote civic engagement. Don't just come to the communities when you're running for office. In encouraging people to engage in peaceful, constructive ways to express their political views. Don't just go to the choir that knows the song that you're singing. Go to those members who are singing in a choir but may not like the song or the repertoire that you come from. Because truly, everybody has a different key to sing in the song that they have been given. All of us can't sing baritone. Everybody can't sing alto. Everybody can't be a falsetto like Sam Cooke was one of the best falsettos there was. Um, but being able to engage and promote civic healthy civic engagement. How do we resolve conflicts non-violently? We are living increasingly in a violent society rooted in political partisanship and ideology. That's where we're going, and then we want to, of course, address mental health and political extremism. We talked about that, addressing the underlying psychological and emotional factors that drive political extremism. What are those things? What is the language that fueled people? You have those who feel disenfranchised and alienated. We have to talk about those things. We need to be more in, and this is not about my way or no way. And I know there are those who say we take the high road when they take the low road, but we also know that you have done some things that have messed up the road for others. That's a whole different conversation. Um, but let's not act as if we are absolutely perfect, right? In what we are displaying or presenting, we have to look at those things in which it creates a more healthy idea and address political extremism. And last but not least, I'm almost done. Last but not least, we need to look at civic unity. We need to understand civic unity. Find ways to bring everybody as much as we can together from all sides, from all spectrums of work under a shared goal, such as common welfare, community building, social cohesion. All of these things can help bridge the gap between polarized groups. Listen, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for listening to us here at Making the Case. Once again, you just heard the music before we sign off, but Making the Case, here at Making the Case, we address social, political, religious, and business debates and decisions. And in those, we seek and promise to bring persuasive and progressive analytics where we can bring about a society that is seeking justice and balance. Listen, thank you guys so much. Go to our YouTube channel if you want to hear more like this, and you're going to be seeing, we will have a schedule of guests that we will have on. But thank you so much. Listen, all the way from us here at Making the Case, we want to say Happy New Year to you, and we look forward to seeing you be a part of what we're doing here. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon. How long was that?